Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 1-0 podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Penn State's newest commitment. We're also going to be talking about the summer arrivals, and then we'll touch on the players who have left the program and found new homes. So to get us kicked off here, Penn State picked up a commitment from tight end Matt Henderson out of Powhatan, Virginia, which is a population of like under 500 people. So really great job by the staff to kind of identify him there. He wasn't ranked by any major recruiting service when he committed, but now I believe he's a composite 4-star. So they hopped on that quick, got him ranked. So another blue chip recruit added to the 2025 class for Penn State. What are your guys' initial reactions about him?
I think it's great that I mean, like you said, from a super small town in Virginia, not a lot of talent probably comes out of there, if like any at all. And it's just a great job by the staff finding another kind of like hidden gem, especially in the tight end room. I feel like that's something they've been able to do in past years, and so this is just another example of that. But I think he's gonna be a really good tight end. And they're gonna do well developing him. I mean, he's already like 210 or around that range. I mean, he has all the physicality already. So, it's just about development.
Yeah, I mean, kind of off of that, I think there's potential for him not just in the tight end room, but I think you could also look at him, especially in Nicky's offense in the receiver room. I mean, again, you look at Kansas. Kansas had receivers that are about 6'5", 6'6", and he's already 210 pounds. That's obviously small for a tight end. So even if he doesn't, get the chance to bulk up when he comes, into the program, there's potential that you could say, okay, maybe he's a receiver, and if not, okay, he bulks up and he answers that tight end use. So I think when you're Penn State, especially with a guy that wasn't, that highly touted guy before they offer, before he committed to Penn State, I think there's a lot of potential with that. There's a lot to work with just having that potential in both rooms to
Yeah, I also think it was interesting too. They offered him 12 days before he committed. So it
yeah.
was like a really fast turnaround. Like he liked what he saw, and now he's like rated as a 4-star compositely and all that. So I mean, definitely a good pull from Penn State there.
Yeah, but I think kind of off of that too, like 'cause I remember I think 247 Sports had said that Penn State had kind of had saw him in the winter and said, okay, come back in the spring. Maybe you get an offer, maybe you don't. And obviously he showed something, and whatever he showed got him the 4-star status. So I think there's a lot of upside, and it also kind of reminds me, not obviously as a player because he's the tight end in a totally different situation, but kind of reminds me of Drew Aller when he first came. As remember, I think Penn State was maybe the first team to offer him, and then he started getting his stock, and then everyone came on, but he said, okay, I'm gonna stay with Penn State. So I think there's a lot of upside with that, and I think that's a really good pull for James Franklin.
I'll be interested to see if they do keep him at tight end though, just because they need the
Mhm.
help at receiver, and he does have a background playing receiver, and recently transitioned over to tight end. And like you guys mentioned, 210, he could either skim down a little bit, get into that receiver range, or bulk up a bit, and he would definitely have time to do that. Because I don't see him starting in, freshman, sophomore year with the depth that Penn State has in the room. Penn State had four more players arriving on campus this summer. Caleb Brewer, Peter Gonzalez, Anthony Specca, Malachi Williams. They were the last four in the 2024 class who weren't there in the spring as an early enrollee. So they arrive on campus now. And I think out of the group, it's gonna be pretty hard for any of them to see, playing time this fall just because A, they're arriving kind of late compared to, most of the rest of the class. And B, it's just a pretty deep room. One of the guys I think who can contribute potentially is Peter Gonzalez, wide receiver. He's ranked as a 3-star right now by most outlets. I think On3 has him as a 4-star. But I think that might be a little bit low for him. I was watching some of his highlights earlier, and the first thing is you pull up his junior and senior year highlights, and the very first clip is him making a one-handed catch like 50 yards downfield. And it's like, this guy might be legit. Um, I think he plays mostly at like the Z position. Z receiver, sometimes X, so just on the outside, but he's got good speed. I think maybe the acceleration could use some work, but once he reaches that top speed, he can kind of take the top off of defense, be sort of that deep threat that Penn State's been missing. So if there is a path to playing time, again, a little bit thin at wide receiver, Penn State's looking for some options there. He could present something that they don't really have, which is, a big guy with size at that position. So they're on campus now. The entire class is on campus. So Penn State kind of turning its attention to the 2025 class, like we mentioned. Things are probably going to get start heating up there. They're probably going to get some more commitments this summer. Usually they get a lot in the coming months, so I would stay tuned for that. I mean, this is like prime recruiting time right now.
Yeah.
During the off season, the coaches are all across the country looking for high school talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think off of that, just going back to Peter, I think there's a lot of potential there just in the sense that again, the room is thin. Like it's like thinner than like a little piece of paper. Like there's not really much to work with. And you talk about him being able to play the X, being able to play the Z. I mean, I think they have a problem there trying to figure out who's their X, who's their Z. I mean, you got Julian Fleming, but I don't think Julian Fleming. I mean, my thing is I haven't heard enough about him knowing that he's this 5-star who was at Ohio State, who was supposed to get drafted here and here, but decided to stay. You expect to hear a little bit more in the spring, and you haven't heard anything that's a little concerning for me. So I think they definitely have a problem there. And even if he is fine, you need some depth behind that. So I think he is the only one that I would say has real potential, playing potential right now. I mean, I think Malachi Williams, defensive end, I think he has a chance as well to get some maybe back end playing time just as they kind of rotate DNs through and maybe even the bowl game if players are, Abdul Carter and Deni Dennis Sutton decide to declare, maybe that's some playing time for him. But as far as the actual regular season when the games matter, I don't think there's really any place for the summer arrival just because of how late it is and how hard it is to kind of get adjusted from high school to college.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, like you said, the receiver room is really thin. I mean, it's everyone's big question mark. I feel like we talk about it, every week, every week here. But so it's possible that, Gonzalez, gets a little bit of time just because, I mean, there's not a ton of options, but I mean, still, it's going to be hard just because, like you said, Avery, they're coming in the summer, don't have that much time to really learn the whole scheme and everything like that. So, but, future's bright for sure.
Yeah. And then some of the guys on the other side who are departing from the program, or have previously departed have found some new homes. So recently, like Taquan Roberson, who wasn't here the last 2 seasons, he was at UConn, but before that was at Penn State for 3 seasons. He finds his new home. He's headed to Kansas State, so he's getting back into Power Five, Power Four, whatever you want to call it. He was there at UConn for 2 seasons. He was the starter, or he was named the starter in 2022 and got hurt on the second drive of the first game. So didn't really play. He was out for the whole season actually, and then comes back, wins the starting job again in 2023, and put up some pretty solid numbers. Um, so earned himself an offer to Kansas State. He'll head there, and then Dante Cephas is also headed there. We knew that previously, but I think that's kind of funny that we'll potentially see some Roberson to Cephas touchdown passes this season, which would be a fun moment. And then some other guys who are kind of moving around. We have King Mack who confirms he's going to Alabama. We had Malik McLean, who's headed to Arizona State. And I saw the interesting thing for McLean is he actually worked with Kenny Dillingham, the Arizona State head coach, while he was at Florida State. So he's kind of reuniting there. I was a little bit confused at first about just the logistics going from Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona,
Yeah.
all across the country like that. But he reunites with one of his former coaches. So it kind of makes sense when you think about it in that context. So I don't know. Do you guys think they'll kind of find more success at their new spots, or did any of those moves stand out to you guys?
Yeah, I mean the biggest one that stood out to me is obviously King Mack. I mean, I think he was set to play probably with Jalen Reed, maybe rotate at the line position, which is obviously their kind of hybrid safety, kind of nickel corner, whatever you want to call it, position. Well, Alabama has the same exact position. They call it the star position. I know you have guys like Malachi Moore that came through there and played that position. So I think that'll be a really big role for him to get to kind of step up like that. And especially like you're thinking they lost Caleb Downs. I mean, They still do have Malachi Moore there. I know he's playing some safety now, and I think there's a lot of chance to grow at the University of Alabama for King Mack. So I think that's a really good opportunity, whether he plays or not this season. I mean, people go to Alabama to just grow as players. There's a lot of players that go there, get no sort of in-game film, transfer, and go wherever they want. So whether it's to play or whether it's to just learn from one of the best, football programs in recent memory, I think that's a really good opportunity for him.
Yeah, I think all three, kind of end up in good situations. Like you said, Joel, I mean, Malik reunites with his old coach, and then like Avery said, Matt goes to Alabama, which obviously, powerhouse. You're always gonna learn something there, especially under, Kalen DeBoer now. That's great head coach, obviously proved that in Washington. And so yeah, I think all three of them end up in good situations, and it'll be interesting to see, what kind of success they have at their new homes.
TV networks are starting to claim which games they want to broadcast, which brings up the annual discussion of which game should be Penn State's whiteout. There are a few good options this year. I think more options than we've seen in the past, but which one do you guys like the most for this year's whiteout?
I think this year, I think it's got to be UCLA. I mean, I kind of talked about it in my dueling column that came out, I think today or yesterday. I think UCLA is the most realistic option, thinking of again the TV deals and all the restrictions that happen with nighttime games in the Northeast. I think UCLA just makes the most sense, and I think it looks good. Like UCLA, they wear the white shirts, the gold pants, the gold helmet, the blue accents. I think that's just pretty on at a whiteout. And photographers would love it. I think spectators would love it. I think the game might not be as competitive because UCLA is in a rebuild, but I think it'll be a sight to see. And then, of course, you don't want to lose on the whiteout. So, I mean, no hurt for James Franklin and company.
Yeah, I definitely think UCLA it's probably, I'd be shocked if it wasn't the whiteout just because of how it's gonna like line up with TV deals and everything. But I also think obviously Ohio State's there. That's the one that everyone is gonna point to like, oh, like that should be the whiteout just because, rivalry, all the history, all the Penn State fans want to like beat them for the first time since 2016. It'd be really cool, like nighttime whiteout, all that. But I also think Washington's a good option, obviously or in the national championship game last year. Have never played at Beaver Stadium. It would be really cool to see. But yeah, I would be shocked if it wasn't UCLA, but there's also like you said, Joel, there's a lot of great options. Just because of how stacked the schedule is this year, at least in conference play. So
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they value. Um, because you can obviously do it for any of the teams. If you do it in November, it's tricky because there's the rules with night games, things like that. They would have to get the other schools to agree to doing a night game, and I doubt Ohio State or Washington would want to do that. I mean, if you can get them to agree, then I feel like that's kind of the easy answer right there. But also like you have to value winning the game.
mhm.
Um, I mean, they've won the last four and six of the last seven. So Penn State's like gotten a lot of wins in the whiteout. But historically, I think they're around 500 in the whiteout game. And again, it's going to be typically against a tough opponent. So it's going to be hard to, get wins. But I don't know. Do you guys think it's important to use it against like your toughest opponent, or is it more important to get a win because you're going to have that like national exposure?
I think tough opponent just because it does give a significant advantage, I think just like with the crowd noise and everything. I mean, obviously there's a famous Michigan video with like the Mo Bamba and it's just so loud. I mean, I don't know if did they I think they lost that game.
I think they won
Did they
the
win? Okay.
2019
Um
one.
Okay, yeah. So, and they won that game too and everything. So, but I mean, like you said, they're about 500 like all time, but that's because they purposely make it against, the tough opponent. I think that adds to the hype around it. It's like this is like, one of Penn State's biggest games of the year and it's like they might not win, but it's still a great atmosphere and everything. But I also think in recent years they've prioritized more being at night and it being like like a more winnable game, I guess. I mean, like with Iowa and Minnesota the past 2 years, I mean, those weren't really like no one was really like, oh, this is a really, really tough game for Penn State. So I mean, it depends, but I think overall this year, I think toughness of opponent would honestly be better than winnable.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a coach, and I think it goes further beyond the coach. Obviously, the athletic director, they all kind of work together to kind of get the schedules
Mhm.
together. But as a coach, it's hard to want to play maybe the toughest team, like say Alabama's on your schedule. It depends, what your program level is. If you're, I'm gonna take Penn State out of the equation. If you're like, sure, like Michigan last year, you're like, sure, we can play Alabama in our toughest environment, cool.
They're
But
yellow
if
out.
you're
Or sorry, maize out. The maize out.
that, yeah, but if you're like Iowa, you're like, ooh, I'm not gonna, because like if you're being realistic, which again, coaches have to be honest with themselves and know what they're working with. If you're being realistic, you're not winning that game. So why not put your biggest game, your biggest money maker, which is why the AD and everyone else comes into play? Why not put that against a team that you could beat or have a really good game against versus instead of having, okay, we want to play the best team in the country. Like Ohio State might be number one when Penn State plays them, and I don't think that James Franklin's squad is ready for that with how they look currently.
I mean, you also have to be careful with the other direction where you don't want it to be like too much of a blowout because the last two, like the Minnesota and Iowa games, like Iowa was ranked going into that matchup, but I think everyone was expecting, I think the point spread was probably around like 10, 14, something like that going into the game. And then the Minnesota one, like I just remember being there, and that was honestly a pretty quiet game. I think the Ohio State game that year, even though it was at noon, was just like a louder environment just because of the opponent. Like that Minnesota game, people started leaving in the second half, and the stands were kind of emptying out. I mean, Minnesota couldn't do anything that day, and even similar to the Iowa game where they blanked them. So you do have to be careful. I think you want an opponent that can, like the Auburn game in 2021, I think was perfect because it's a ranked opponent. It's a team you don't usually play, which is why, UCLA kind of fits that mold, which is like not a team that you traditionally have in Beaver Stadium. And it was a close game. It was a ranked team, one score game, and then Penn State ends up winning. I think that was like the perfect choice, like that Auburn game, even though it was a little bit earlier in the year. I think that was the right call from Penn State. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do this year. They've got a lot of options. Um, and we'll have to kind of wait and see what games the networks have the rights to broadcast. That'll kind of dictate because if Fox gets, these games and puts them on big noon kickoff, Penn State's probably not going to want to do the whiteout. They love keeping it at night. It wouldn't be the first time they've done it during the day, but I think with the scale that it's grown to, Fox or Penn State definitely wants to keep the whiteout at night. It
Mhm.
just looks better visually, and they know it's going to be, nationally televised. You want the best possible look. You know that video is what's going to get clipped. That's the video that's going to be used on social media. Like the whiteout is synonymous with Penn State at this point. That
Mhm.
game kind of represents the program. And so you want it to look as good as possible. So they definitely like having it at night. The white just pops more, and everything like that. So yeah, I agree. It's probably UCLA, but we'll have to kind of wait and see, um, you know, what happens with the networks moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of just off of that, I think you want to go with like a team that's kind of middle of the pack. Like I think, as you said, you don't want to go with the worst team that you're going to beat 55, 75 zip. Is no one's going to come to the game. You're not really going to make any money. It's going to be boring. So many reasons why you just don't want to do that. I think if you kind of
Yeah,
pick
we can eliminate Bowling Green and Kent State from
it's
whiteout contention,
well,
breaking.
Illinois as well. I mean, obviously, we know how that'll go. I mean, I think their conference opponent, which is the only reason that would happen, but I don't think that's something realistic. And obviously, if you're Penn State, you kind of wish you get the pick of your games each year, like home and away, based on where you want the whiteout to be. Like maybe say you're like, oh, let's swap USC and UCLA. I think USC would have been the perfect opponent for the whiteout, and I think that the mystique behind that would have been crazy. I think.
That would have been awesome. And the
Mhm.
uniform matchup too, with
Yeah.
like the red dude.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been so cool.
When are they
We
playing
missed out.
year after at home, or is it home and away?
Do they get him again?
I think
I'd
they're
have to
home.
check the schedule.
But when they do, I think that's you got to slot them in. I think that or
Yeah.
Oregon. Oregon would be crazy. Oregon come out in the all white with
Oh.
chrome helmets. If they chrome helmets. Oh
Yeah, that's what Penn State needs to prioritize. Just think about the uniform matchup.
my other
Yeah.
teams.
That's the only thing that matters.
Honestly.
That's it for today's episode of the 1 and 0 podcast. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Joel Haas.
Avery Hill.
I'm Lexie Linderman.
For more football coverage, you can find us at psucollegian.com and follow us on socials. We'll see you next time.